What's up, everybody? Welcome to another episode of the Surf and Sales podcast brought to you by the Surf and Sales Summit. I am one of the two co-hosts and co-founders of Surf and Sales. I'm Scott Leese, here with my good friend and partner, Richard Harris. Top of the morning to you, Richard.
Oh, good morning, my friend. How are you doing?
I'm doing good. See how I already threw a tiny bit of British English in there?
I know. You might be giving away hints of where our guests
it's in anticipation of our guest. Janice B Gordon is with us today, all the way across the pond. She is the customer growth expert at Scale Your Sales, and we are very fortunate and happy to have her. Welcome to the show, Janice.
Oh, I'm looking forward to this with you two guys. See, my American.
Oh yeah, very American. We're gonna go back and forth all day on slang.
What's the British equivalent of you guys? What is that?
Bro, probably bro.
Bro,
whether it's male or female. Yeah. How you doing, bro?
All right. I would not have guessed that, but I'm glad.
Actually,
I would have said mates.
Mate. Do you know I'm a better class of English, you see. That's
yeah. I'm the small folk. I'm one of the small folk in the way I speak. Yeah. Janice is she's a highborn. She's a highborn.
I was gonna say I'm noticing the House of Dragon reference right there.
Yeah. So tell everybody. Hold on. Let's have her tell everybody what is a customer growth expert. And a little bit about what you do and where you do it, so people have some context.
I would happily do that. First of all, have you got Liverpool Football Club in the background, Scott?
Yes, I do. It's ever present. I have multiple things Liverpool related all around my house. Yeah.
This is why you're international. I get it now. Okay, right. Okay, well, I also will not say anything against Liverpool and insult my host.
Please do.
Well, by the end of the show, she might change her mind. But for right now.
Right now. Well, I'm Janice B Gordon, the customer growth expert, and I've got over 30 years of experience in B2B strategy and customer-centric growth. And I've really dedicated my career to transforming sales teams to be more efficient and customer focused. And where this came from, I worked in financial services in the 1990s in sales. And then I went to work as a consultant in customer experience. And it just blew my mind. We did these customer journeys, and I realized that customers are the best innovators and creators. They just know the best way of doing things. So various companies I worked with, and we used to do these customer journeys, and the tech team would design the journey. The customer would always find the shortcut, the quickest, the better way of getting to where they needed to go, even if that was not designed in. So it really made me think about why we kind of pushing. You all know the 70s, I'm aging myself, the 90s. And our system of sales was very much based on the American system of sales. So it's very much numbers driven, stand up, cold calling, all of that we're not allowed to do now in Europe. So I realized that the better way to sell was rather to push is to pull, really understand your customer, which was what customer experience was all about, and that was the starting point. So that kind of blew my mind and started me thinking about a better way of selling. So out of that came the Scale Your Sales framework many years later as it was evolving. So I have the Scale Your Sales podcast, and I interview wonderful people, and I don't know why I've not had you two on yet. Maybe you've just been ignoring my emails because it's not for the want of asking. But I thought I'd put that out in the public so you can't say no.
Oh my God, she's weird. Wow, I love this. Janice, just take over to the show.
And so my mission is to empower sales leaders and sales teams to accelerate revenue growth through customer retention, customer-centric sales, but particularly the starting point is to have exceptional sales practices.
There's a million and one tangents that I could go off on right now. The first one I'm thinking is, let's pick on Richard and I. Let's presume that you actually did send us some type of cold DM or cold email or something like that, right? Is anybody scaling their sales right now through cold prospecting, like cold emailing and cold DMs? And if
No.
so, oh, well, that would answer that question. I was going to say, and if so, how are they doing it? But the answer is no. Okay. So let's
it
assume the answer is
no, and it depends. It depends on what continent you're in. It depends
give me
on
the depends. What continent are people still scaling sales with email?
We're not allowed to cold call. So in Europe, in the UK, we don't do cold calling. We might do warm calling, but not cold calling. And there's still a lot about in the US in pick up the phone, call numbers, all of that. So that was our starting point in sales when I was, in direct sales in the 1990s. We've moved away from that in Europe, and there's various legislation that has, prevented us from doing that type of cold calling sales. So there's an element that continues, because I still get people trying to call me and sell me things, right? And they're normally not in Europe. So there are some people that are still doing that, but it's not a great practice.
Yeah. So what are you surrounding it with right now?
Am I surrounding?
What are you so you can still cold email, but that's not going to work on its own. So what are you telling people and coaching people they need to do in addition to?
Right. It's not in addition to. The starting point is your customer. The starting point is understanding your customer really well and understanding that they have a need, maybe not an immediate need, but they have a need for your product. So often on cold calling, it's on the numbers game, in that you're, throwing anything at it and thinking that there's a percentage, 5% of people where it'll be relevant, but I will call 100 people knowing that I'll probably get 5%. That may be not what your manager tells you when he is encouraging you, but you're throwing everything at it. So for me, that's a waste of energy and a waste of time. Rather, I'd prefer to call those 5 people, because I've nurtured them online. I have understood the language they use, what their priorities are. I've done all of the research around them. So I've really narrowed down, where is my sweet spot of customers? I understand who I've sold to before, who I've worked with, what the relationship is there. So I should have enough history to know where my sweet spot is. What I need to do is do the work and research who else is similar to the audience I've already got. Do they have a need? I may need to follow them for a period of time and read their material and start to engage with them. Yes, it's a longer process, but in the end, when I'm only calling 5 people and I'm saying something that's relevant to them.
I'm getting over a cold, and I'm always known to speaking while on mute, so I'm trying to avoid both problems.
I thought for sure we were going to get one right there.
Yeah, I know. It'll happen. So Janet, because you took me down the path of exactly that, of like, because Scott and I live in America, we sell into America, we work with most of our clients in America, and it is still this numbers game, right? Email, cold call. And I get the concept of what you're saying, like you got to slow down to speed up, right? And that's been done legislatively on your side. Does it ever catch back up? Like as an American, as someone who's been doing it the other way for so long, right? Like I'm like you, I've been selling since the 1900s, right? Does it ever catch back up to the volume level, or have leaders in the companies in the EU adjusted their growth expectations, or are they putting money into other campaigns that drive more inbound? Because, as a rep, what am I like? I'm on social all day. I'm doing stuff on LinkedIn, but are you telling me I'm only making 7 calls a day? Like I'm trying to paint this picture, because I cannot grasp it. And of course, if someone came to the US and told us that, we would all be scared crazy. Your business, like you'd be hiring me, because I'd be like, I need a job and you know how to do this, Janice, so hire me. But that's a long question, but what is somebody doing all day? Like what's happening? Like explain that.
Okay, so let's just let me part that question for a moment and just look at the future of sales. What is the future of sales? What's kind of driving the changes in our go-to-market strategies, and particularly our changes in the behaviors of our buyers? So we're talking B2B, behaviors of buyers. There's so much, whether you're talking Gartner, Forrester's, there's so much information and research out there. They don't want to speak to salespeople. Why don't they want to speak to salespeople? Well, they're sick of being bombarded by salespeople. So they put all these blocks and barriers in place. It's getting harder to reach the people you need to reach because actually they've already been down that line and they clearly don't like it. They're giving us clear signals. They don't like it. They're putting in barriers. They're making it a lot harder. So, you know, what you could do is, okay, it's difficult to get hold of people. Well, you call instead of 100, 200 people. Well, then does that go to 500 people? When does that become impossible? Perhaps we ought to take some of those buyer signals and start to think about, well, okay, is there another way of doing this? Is that if our buyers do not want to work with salespeople, they do not want to get cold calls from salespeople, we need to start picking up on some of those buyer signals. There's also stats out there to say, you know, buyers are often, they like self-service and they're maybe 70% through the process before they want to actually speak to a salesperson. And then they don't want to speak to lots of salespeople. They want to speak to the salespeople or companies and products they've already self-selected. So there's a whole 70% of the journey that the buyer has already gone on without you. And that's their preference for many, many buyers. So we need to start listening to all of the research that's out there, and it's been out there for the last 5 years, that buyers are changing and they want a different type of service. So we can continue to do what we've always done and go from the 50 calls a day to the 100 to the 200 to, you know, auto dialing and all of that, and you're speeding up. We really need to listen to how our market is changing and what they want from us. So that's the future of sales, one aspect. Another aspect is, I spoke at Pavilion and I asked the CROs to raise their hands if they could achieve the same level of revenue expectations with 50% of their teams. And about 25% of them said yes, but the other 75% said no, it's not possible. This is not possible. Well, if we again look at what is the data telling us, you know, there's so much out there in AI and automation and hybrid, and how we're moving away from silos, and, you know, we're getting much smarter and quicker, and that, you know, 90% of buyers' time is spent away from sellers. So do we need all of those sellers when the buyers don't want to see them? So there's so much that's indicating this sales, that operation needs to change. And if it isn't anticipating those changes, it's already changing on them.
Okay.
Does that start to answer your
No,
question?
I'm sitting here, I'm listening, and I'm going, yes, and that makes sense. And I agree with you. You know, the buyer behavior what's the word I'm looking for? Dictates. Right. Yeah. The buyer behavior dictates, you know, how they want to be sold to. Right. And, you know, there is this piece around the AI, and, you know, I don't know that a buyer wants to talk to AI any more than they want to talk to a human. Right. At this stage of the game, I don't think the experience has been, you know, the experience through that isn't quite great yet. It's getting there, you know, and it will get better. But, you know, so what do you do? So now I have a sales team of 10 or 15. So do I cut my sales team in half? And look, you know, short of, look, these are people with jobs and families, because we're not inhuman here. We're not, you know, we understand what that really means. So what is my team doing?
Right. Okay. So
that's the question.
With AI, the buyer isn't talking to
so
AI, but what's happening for the sales team is using AI tools allows them to do what they do quicker. So if they can do what they do quicker by enabling these tools, AI tools, that means instead of having 2 people doing a job, you can have 1.5 people, because they're able to gather the information, look for buyer intent, all of these things that AI can do a lot quicker for us, point it in the right direction, give it the information, it comes back quicker. So I can look as a salesperson a lot smarter. I can do more in-depth information. It can help me to identify the right people and the, triggers. And so it can do all of that wider research for me a lot quicker, rather than me sitting at my computer than doing it. So that means that's one aspect, in that you're able to have less people in role, because you're enabling the tools that are available now to do what they do a lot quicker and be much smarter in more depth. Yeah. So you've got a team of salespeople, and we know, and it's been this way for the last, 30 years, that less than 50% of sales teams' target is achieved by, and in fact,
way lower than that in the last couple of years. Way lower.
Well, that's exactly, I was going to say, lockdown, it was moving up to 70% are not achieving target. Right. So we know that these stats are around. So what would happen if you took the worst performers out of that? That stat begins to improve. Let's say if you took 50% of the consistent worst performers, that stat starts to improve. What happens to the manager that's spending all of their time trying to enable someone that actually shouldn't be in that seat? All right. All of that management time, does he have more, or she have more time to actually spend on some of the B players to support them to become A players? Probably so, because you've probably been that manager at some point where you're literally pulling your hair out. You're putting in so much effort into a sales person that isn't performing. And if we're saying that 60, 50, 70, whatever the percentage of people are underperforming, there's managers that's spending an awful lot of time on that. So remove all of that. Remove much of that out of your system that's underperforming. You've released time, and it means that you can concentrate on the higher performers and enable them. So in so many ways, when we look at the future of sales, the sales team is going to change, because we cannot continue to make bad decisions. We cannot continue to have managers stressed out. We cannot continue to have so many underperformers. OMG has done some research that says 70% of salespeople either shouldn't be in sales, hence that underperformance stat that we've had for about 30 years, or in the wrong seats or in the wrong positions for their skill set, their natural skill set, 77%.
I would say that's not just in sales. I would say that's in a lot of places.
Allow me to make a potentially dark counter argument.
Okay.
Or something of the like. So you're talking about, like, imagine if we got rid of those salespeople that didn't belong. Basically, they weren't any good. What would the manager do with their time? Here's what I think will happen, or could happen. I don't think those managers will have a job, is what I think will happen. There's not as many people around. There's not as many managers needed. And everybody likes to trumpet this thing right now that's like, AI is not going to replace your job. Meanwhile, in the dark corners of all the venture capital rooms that I'm in and all the founder conversations that I'm in that are not being recorded, they're also saying, how can we do more with less? You need to lay off 20% of your company, replace it with AI. So publicly, they're like, AI won't replace your job. We're just here to help you. And privately, they're like, how do we get rid of your entire team and all of your staff and replace it with AI? So you get rid of 70% of these salespeople that are no good. It's a nice thought. Oh, now the managers can focus on all the B players and the A players. But to me, the reality becomes, the managers who are still there, the other managers are gone. They're dead. They're out on the street finding a new line of work. What would you say to that? as a
I'd say yes,
possibility?
absolutely. Why would you get rid of a sales team and keep all of the managers? I mean, some
Don't
of them,
know.
you're
Yeah.
downsizing your whole operation, and you
Yes.
want it to be sharper and high
So the
performers.
future of sales is downsizing.
The number of people in sales operation, the job has got a lot smarter, enabled by an AI. And for so many years, we've had a lot of waste, a lot of underperformance in sales. It's no longer, it used to be that, in fact, I spoke to a sales manager last year on recruitment, and their intention was to recruit 5, knowing that perhaps 1, maybe 2 people would survive. It's like, really, are we still in the dark ages of doing that? Really? Are we not doing it a lot smarter now? And I can tell you there's better ways of recruiting, but this was only, the tail end of last year. We've always done that. Well, surely we've moved on since then. We've evolved. We need to start doing things in a different, smarter, more productive way, because you're wasting human capital. You're wasting, it's disrespectful to our sales teams in order to do that. And we've got a whole industry, the recruitment industry, that is brought into, let's just throw more people. Well, growth at all costs. Just adding more people in will not give you the performance that you want going forward.
No disagreement. Where do all those people go now for work that just got laid off?
Right. Okay. Well,
because we're downsizing. Where do they go? What are the jobs that are left? This is where it starts.
Janice is hiring me. Janice,
this is where it gets dystopian for me, and it starts to get bleak, and people don't want to think about that possibility of how bleak it might get.
Right. Okay. Let me give you my experience when we're in that situation. So working with a sales leader, they kept and it was only 5 people in the sales team, but 3 of them were underperforming and have done continuously, but they wanted to get through the COVID. And so they just, stuck with what they had. They were bringing in something, but obviously they're underperformers. So for many years, they were paying these salaries, many years anyway. So they had 2 high performers, 3 consistent underperformers, and it was taking up a lot of the manager's time. And so the worry was, well, I've got a relationship with them. What am I going to do with them? We did an assessment, went through the assessment with the underperformers, and the underperformers, because it's so detailed, it's very difficult to argue against it. 2 of the underperformers raised their hand and said, look, I'm out of here. I'm out of here. Like the greatest gift you can give people is helping them to understand themselves. What salespeople do is they struggle. They get brought into the salary. They think, I've just got to keep going, but they're hating it. It's hard out there. They're absolutely hating it. So as soon as you can shine a mirror up against people and enable them to self-select themselves out of the struggle, and if you are the kind of organization that will support them onto the next role, where they will be in a space where they're playing to their strengths potentially, rather than struggling, and their ego will not allow them to admit to the struggle, then they're able to move on into a role that's best suited to them. But unless you allow people to do that, to self-select themselves out, then they'll continue with the struggle. The sales managers, in an awful situation, having to try and get this person to perform. Also, part of that 77%, there are people that should be in sales, but they're in the wrong role. They're in the wrong position. And this, an assessment will allow you as a sales leader to assess where they should be, play to their strengths. That's what you need. Then all of a sudden they're accelerating in their role.
I'm exhausted. I feel like I've just been through therapy. Like I've done 20 plus years of therapy. Scott knows this. I feel like that was about 5 of it, like trying to figure out my role in life and my role in work.
You're welcome, Richard.
Thank you. I appreciate it. And it was free. Like, that's the best part. Like, I haven't gotten a bill from you yet. Okay. So, and I love what you said. Like, I call that, can you hug people out the door, right? It's, can that person, maybe they're better at customer success or onboarding or account management or marketing, or move them into HR. Maybe they're like, I don't want sales, but I love the company. Like, don't throw away the brain, all that brain knowledge, right? I think that's really great. So, what's the first thing when you work with a company, right? And I think to some point, once someone calls you, they know they need your help. So they've sort of crossed a little bit of that chasm. What do they have to really get real with? If someone's listening to us today, they're like, wow, Janice has this really good idea. Like, she's really smart. She's laying it out there in an intelligent way. What's this one really uncomfortable thing that leader has to figure out or has to start to recognize if they're going to start to shift in this direction, whether they want to go in that direction or not, because they probably are going to have to go. What's that hump that people have to get through?
I think, if I was to ask them the question, assessing what their revenue goals are for 2025 or so, mm-hmm. And then I'd ask something like, do you have the right people in place that will guarantee you, or that you feel will achieve that revenue goal? And
they'll say no. They'll say no, right?
They'll say no.
So they you just need to help them hear themselves say it out loud.
Yeah. And then it's like, okay, well, do you want some help with that?
Right.
Let's look at that. Let's look how you can ensure that you're more or less guaranteed to get there.
Right. How much of this, by the way, aside from all the technology and all these things, how much of this is also a condition of unrealistic goals in the first place? Right. Because I feel like that's a big piece of this conversation, right? Like, yes, AI could come in, but just because I cut down people, bring in a couple of tools, it's not like next month the numbers start to go up. Generally, maybe they do if you're lucky, but how much of it is just the goals are out of whack?
Well, we're able to assess some of that anyway, because it could be you haven't got a process, Richard, you go into companies, they don't even have a sales process. Yeah. And that's going to make a massive difference. So you're actually not just assessing the team, and that's from sales leader, because you also know often it's the sales leader that is a major block in the system, right? So sales leader, sales manager, sales rep, customer success, the whole sales operation you would assess. That would be the starting point. And then you're able to look, there isn't a sales process in place, that, the goals are too stretched for the capabilities. And, you've also, if you have the evidence as to what the real capabilities are within the existing team to achieve that goal, you've got evidence to reassess what that revenue goal is.
So are you talking about, I think I know the answer is yes, but so you're talking about part of this is a skills assessment, right? Is it possible that the challenge is some of these people aren't good at sales, but there's no process. To your point, manager's not good at teaching the right sales skills or practicing the sales skills. Therefore, the rep doesn't have the sales skills. So is that also part of this to say, wait a minute, this person has natural sales ability. Nobody's been really helping them figure that out. Nobody's taught them how to do discovery or how to negotiate or how to do these very specific things. Is that a big piece of this as well?
That's a piece of it. And it's less, you can always teach skills. It's less on skills and it's more on, it's more on the whole operation. So it's not just the individual. I know we started with that, get rid of these individuals. It's not just on the individual, it's on the whole operation. How does that operation function? So what is the leadership process? What is the sales process? What are the skill sets and traits of and drive of the individuals in the team. So it's an individual assessment. And then if you have a manager that has 4 reports, the manager and the manager is a account holder, is a seller. So you would assess them on their ability to sell, but you would also assess them on their ability to manage. In your assessment of the people in the team, they're also assessing the manager as well. So we get a 360 view of how that entire operation is working. How often the coaching, what is the coaching ability? You know, what is their ability to reach decision makers? There is, it takes 40 minutes, but in that 40 minutes, you get an entire 360 view of how that operation is working.
40 minutes is nothing, right?
It's nothing.
That's nothing. That's a drop in the bucket of a life,
Yeah.
if that much. So, well, this has been awesome. We got to flip this over to you and let you ask us a couple of questions. And I'm putting on my seatbelt because I'm sure it's going to be a doozy or two. But you know, I need you to give some advice to Scott, because Scott has built his business and he refuses to use a CRM, which therefore means I don't think he has a process. He only uses an Excel sheet.
That's not
So
right.
So I want to see if you can convince Scott why he needs a CRM.
Why does Scott? Why do you think? What is it about an Excel spreadsheet that you enjoy?
Ooh,
that
nothing.
you do not enjoy in a CRM?
Nothing.
Nothing.
I don't enjoy anything about an Excel spreadsheet. Okay.
So why
let
do you use it?
me rephrase.
Yeah.
I enjoy that it costs me nothing.
Okay. And so do you get everything that you want from an Excel spreadsheet?
As it pertains to CRM related stuff, yeah.
Okay. So Richard,
yeah,
I don't know why you're trying to persuade Scott to use the CRM.
Because I just like to bust his chops.
It's all based on the wrong assumption. If you listen to the words he said, what he said was, Scott doesn't use a CRM, therefore he has no process. Who says I have no process? I have a process. I have a process. It just doesn't have anything to do with the CRM.
Yeah.
So I love what Janice just said, which is, look, you cut bait with someone like this. You don't try to sell this to somebody.
Oh, that's exactly right.
So no, Janice, I asked this question because it's like one of the few things I can give Scott a hard time about. So, you know, with you coming in at a high process orientation.
Yeah, you've used me. I feel used.
Yeah,
Richard.
That's all right.
I feel used and abused.
Yeah, I would never do that to you.
Yeah, he's so full of shit. You just wouldn't know when he did it. So Janice, what questions you want to ask us? We get this, by the way, this has been fascinating, really, for me, certainly an epiphany moment of really understanding how this is going to change. And I certainly see you at the forefront of this from all the people we talked to. Scott's chiming me offline about how old and crudgety and old man I am because I like the old way. So,
right.
So what questions do you have for us though? We certainly want to return the favor and see if we can help you.
Oh, I love this. I've listened to some of your podcast episodes and it's like, this is really interesting. Okay, so if you had a benchmark, an assessment that clearly highlighted opportunities for creating competitive advantage in the sales operation, yet faced resistance from sales leaders, CROs, that wanting to stick to conventional methods, it's always been like that way. How would you get the CEO to influence the sales leaders and CROs to prioritize this transformational change?
How would I get them?
I know my answer to that.
I would tell them to stop taking institutional money that requires 100x growth for anything to be labeled a success. It's a lot easier to have that conversation with the founder who's not living under those, under those principles where you're a failure if you don't sell a company for $500 billion. if the three of us founded a company right now and we had slow, steady, ambitious, realistic kind of growth goals and so forth, we would be more open to this piece of education and knowledge and nurturing and enablement, all of this kind of stuff. The problem is, even if people agree, they're like, I don't have time for that. I can't raise my next round if we don't hit this thing in time. The board will replace me. If we sell the company for $100 million, that's a loss. I make no money. That's the problem. So you asked me how to have that conversation. I have that conversation with people who have bootstrapped and are building companies in a different kind of manner. Otherwise, it's a fun conversation to have, but nothing gets done. Kind of like politics.
Yeah. So my answer is probably something I learned from you, Scott, is I would try to put together the numbers to a certain extent, and even put together some numbers on the tangent departments around me, like marketing, et cetera. Nothing like very back of the envelope for those departments, very front of the envelope for me. And I would come in massively frustrated to that CRO or that CEO and say, look, I am so frustrated. I don't know where to go. Like, this is what it shows me. Here's where we're at. Here's the projection if we do this. If we don't, and we only stay steady Eddie, right? Then I'm not sure how to, what we're going to do. And I'm really frustrated. Like, how do you think we should solve this? So now I've sort of tried to take my problem and make it their problem, because in technicality, it really is their problem. But as soon as you tell someone you're frustrated, they will tend to try to help you just out of human nature, right? So, but if I have to give them a reason to, I can't just say, I'm really frustrated that my boss is being a jerk. That's not good enough, right? And you have to find in my mind, the professional way to be frustrated, right? Without finger pointing, and use more data pointing. That's probably my approach to it. I'm curious, did either one of us get the answer right?
Well, I thought I've had that experience of, and it's interesting, the companies that are funded.
Yeah.
And it's just, it's so disheartening. It's disheartening. I am really disheartened. I'm disheartened by the structure of our industry and how disrespectful it can be to our customers in the way that we are throwing it down their throat and, selling. And I want it to, maybe I'm naive, I want it to be different. I want it to be where we're working in partnership with our buyers and our customers, and we're growing together. And, maybe I'm just an idealist, but yes, I'm constantly coming up against those that say, yes, this is great, but then they stick with what they've already done, and they're, throwing more salespeople to the wall, not investing in them. And it's kind of in a world that
I agree. I think in my approach, this frustration thing, it's also an opportunity for me as a leader to see where this company's going, because maybe it's time for me to get out the door. Maybe that's my, so
go
it's
where?
a little bit of well, I don't know yet, but at least I know where I'm headed. At least I have more control.
There is nowhere for people to go.
Then I have to stick it out.
No, you don't. You have
or go on my own.
One clear option. That's the answer.
Right. I can go out on my own and do my own thing.
That's the answer.
Become fractional.
When you're sick of all this other stuff, you have to create your own thing that is not built in the image of the thing you despised. And more people are doing that. There's a mass talent drain out there because more and more people are taking their skills and going to South Beach, to quote LeBron. It's like fractional gigs, freelance gigs, gig economy type roles, all of this stuff. There's nowhere for them to go, right? And I feel bad for the people who don't have those skill sets or that experience or the education to know like how to maneuver and find different ways to make money to not play in this particular game anymore. Those are the ones that are stuck. The other people who have those skills, who are just too scared, I don't have much sympathy for those people, right? But there is nowhere for people to go. You say, I got to leave. Okay, great. What you do is you leave, you go to this other place who tells you a really good story. And the first year you're there and it's like, wow, this is pretty cool. And the second year you're like, I don't know what's going on here. It's starting to feel kind of weird. And by the third year, you're like, this is terrible. It's just like the last place that I was at. I got to leave. And that's if you double the tenure. The average tenure is like a year and a half. I'm talking about 3 years. So even my story is a miracle at times. This is the challenge for people. I like Janice's optimistic, like thinking around it. I want it to change, all that kind of stuff. I do too. I am very pessimistic about its ability to change unless we change it completely, burning everything to the ground, and people go build companies themselves in a different kind of manner. I don't see how else it's going to get fixed.
Going to let the small folk take over.
That's right. Small folk rise from the bottom.
Right.
So I wonder then if you see that there will be fractional sales people.
But there already are.
They will be but that will be the growing. In order to buy in the talent you want, it will be the kind of freelance type basis.
Yeah, already is.
Yeah.
You could argue, even without meaning to, you could argue that I am a freelance independent contractor like SDR right now. Mm-hmm. Because a bunch of big name companies come to me and they say, hey, Scott, here's a list of 65 decision makers at these companies that I'm trying to get a hold of. We've been unsuccessful. It seems like you know them. And I'm like, okay, let me look at the list. And I say, well, shit, I know 8 out of 60 something of these people. I know 16, 17% of these people. I message these people that I know. They're like, sure, I'll take a meeting with Janice. Bang, I just opened up 8 opportunities for you. I get paid if those deals close. I'm a freelance SDR running a non-cold calling, non-cold emailing type of business. It's a near-bound motion. It's a referral motion. It's an affiliate motion, whatever you want to call it. This is more and more common. And there's lots of people who cold call for multiple companies. If Richard is over here working for Salesforce, okay, and he's got $1 million quota, and he can hit his quota working 3 hours a day, why should he not be allowed to work 3 or 4 hours a day for company B and do the same damn thing? And if he's that good, what if he could work for 3 companies and build enough pipeline and close enough deals to work for 3 companies in 3 different industries, 3 different spaces, 3 different time zones, whatever you want to call it? People know this now. It's very early, but people are starting to do this and create these kinds of 1-2 person businesses, and companies are hiring these people.
So it goes back to changing the way that we've always done things. So it's
Correct.
Not only in terms of the way buyers want to buy, but it's also the way sellers want to sell as well. So the kind of operation that gets onto that quickly and designs their whole go-to-market strategy around these behaviors and the drivers that's changing our industry, the companies that get onto that now will create competitive advantage.
Yes, I think so. I think it'll be easier for the earlier stage companies to do it, right? There's going to be a lot of growing pains.
Why would it be earlier for an earlier stage company? It'd be easier for a later stage company.
When I say later stage, I mean like the big companies, they're just too afraid to make that change. They're not going to go experiment.
I don't think that's happening anymore. Benioff just released a whole thing that said Einstein has all these full AI automated salespeople. Mm-hmm. He's telling you, as soon as the tech is fully ready, all of my staff is going bye-bye.
Yeah.
He's telling you. He's not even hiding it.
Yeah. So
fair point. This is why it's so fun to have these conversations.
Yeah.
Janice. Yeah. We appreciate you being a star of the show and a participant in the Surf and Sales podcast. And I, at least, would love to go on your show. Richard, I don't know.
See how he does that? Of course I would. Please stop. So Janice, how can people get a hold of you? How can people get a hold of you?
LinkedIn, Janice B Gordon. I'm linked on all the platforms. I'm Janice B Gordon. I'd
Great.
love to make sure that you've said that you listen to me here on Surf and Sales, and I'd love to hear from you.
Great. Janice, thank you so much for your time and all your knowledge and wisdom. We really appreciate it. It's been fun.
Yeah, thanks so much.
Yeah, I've loved it. Thank you very much.
All right, we'll see you all next time on the Surf and Sales podcast.